Hi, testing. We're good. We're live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Turn. I would like to begin with apologizing for our delay. We had a bit of technical difficulties, but Ramel, as always, solved them. So I'd like to formally welcome you all to our artist talk for our current exhibition. To all who come to this happy place, welcome, featuring, and I will go right here first, Keith Thompson, Kachelle, Knowles, Delton Barrett. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. So this talk, I think I've been working for just as long as some of you. I think Kachelle, probably you've been working longer. So I think I would like this to be a conversation, more of a dialogue about our shared experiences growing up here and thinking about what it means to cultivate a practice here in regards to mentorship, working in artist-led spaces, and how that influences our current practices. So I want to start with opening the floor with a bit of kind of history. So Keith, as well as Kachelle, and I both are recipients of the Pop-Up Junior Residency Prize. And the Pop-Up Junior Residency Prize is an initiative started by John Cox and Heino Schmidt to look at the talent that was coming out of the College of the Bahamas at the time. And in that, the cohorts was as small as maybe 2 people and as big as 3 to 4 people. And during this opportunity in a space where, Turn didn't exist. The current didn't exist. I think the only major galleries at the time was like the NAGB, possibly Hillside, Pop Up, and Dunkalik, and the DAF as well. So you have a space where it's a studio space. Heino and John specifically are artists. They wear multiple hats. So they're creating a kind of like an incubation space for young Bahamian artists to not only have a studio space, which is wild because if we understand like the cost of renting a studio space, that's such a privilege. And furthering that, they devised trips for us to go on, either to the family island to make site-specific work, or to New York to museum hop, see different gallery shows, do artists studio visits. So my initial questions to Kachelle and Keith are, how did that experience, or that initial experience of being invited into an artist-led space, help to cultivate your thinkings around community, and what it means to like have an artistic practice? It's a long question, but
Just start off with me.
yes.
It definitely changed my perspective on the way I make work, like almost immediately, solely because being in college, it's a certain level of like artwork that is being made.
Can you give us like a year? Like what year is this that you're doing this?
2016.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Just for context.
Right. I'm trying to also make sure that's the correct year. But yeah, essentially looking at the works being made in college and then seeing artists that were already practicing and who understand what it is to have like a visual language, it definitely made me look at the way I was creating works at the level that I was then. Also, like just the way it was constructed at the time, it was so many artists in the space when I was there. I think it was like some number like 20 plus or something like that. And we would have like a lot of conversations, and it'll be, for me, it wasn't really a lot of like work making because I was just trying to like learn like what is it that I'm trying to say, how do I achieve it, and like what is like the best way to make a body of work at that time. So being around like um other artists like Angelica and Sydney, and having older artists like Alex Chemchula and Heino Schmidt moving around the studio, you got different levels of insight, and then people give you like stuff to read, stuff to like look at, And then as you do that, you start to like build your language in your head, and then over time you would be able to like translate it into your work. So like just having that community helps an artist that doesn't understand the difference between institutional artwork or like work just for a grade, as opposed to artwork that will be in gallery spaces or different conversations. So
I want to kind of agree with everything that Keith said. For me, I think I did my residency in maybe 2010, probably. Um, and even before I went to college, I had absolutely zero art experience. I always had the talent of doing it, but I didn't even know an art space existed on the island. So having that community be there, I think I received that much more than actually, as you said, actually doing the work, being in different artist spaces, John Cox, Hino, John Elliott, even the visiting artists that they would have there, they always made it accessible to meet them, to see their work, and to even participate in some of the projects that they had. Because I participated in two international projects from the artists that were here. So I feel like that kind of engagement kind of allowed me to have the resources to formulate my own practice and to investigate. Well, I'm going into Hino's studio and he's telling me the way that he forms his work. What is he inspired by? The books that he reads, and then I kind of you get influenced by that in those ways. Like I like the I like the way that Heino is able to sort of use his different like mediums. You know, he has a bachelor, I think, is a master's in photography, but he primarily
He
does,
does.
but he primarily does sculpture and drawing. John has I think he has a master's in illustration.
Education.
But he does a lot of printmaking and painting, and also kind of like collage and mixed media type work. So that influenced me to experiment with different materials, and that sort of guided me to form like my own practice. So I feel like being in that space was very important for us to sort of like see how actual practicing artists are are making a career.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. I think I had a different experience than you two, because when I had my studio there at first, when I did the prize, I think it was just me and maybe like Duke and like one or two other people, and Nadia. Of course, Heino and Nadia there, but it was like quite quiet. And I was like, whoa, I missed something. Like I was, I think in 2014, maybe. So right in between. The two cohorts. So I thought that that was quite interesting. But I think another side of developing artist practices that we don't really talk about in a way outside of the intuitive language is being a self-taught artist. And I think that we kind of flatten, like the avenues in which you could become an artist, or we kind of push people into binaries to be like, oh, well, either you like are self-taught or you go to college. But I think that it's so much more than that. It's so much education is so much more expansive than that. So, Delton, I wanted you to, because you are a self-taught photographer, so I wanted to hear more about what kind of mode of education that you like engaged during that time, in regards to like artist community looked like for you, because I know that there's a very big photography community here. So there's a lot of photographers within the Bahamas, and a lot of them find camaraderie when they work for different news outlets and papers. And I know it was different in the like 70s when you had to actually have to like go get film developed, and you racing and go get film developed together. But I just wanted to know if you could give us more about what who was around you while you were developing, and how that created an educational space for you, if that makes sense.
Honestly, before photography, I was painting a little bit. Yeah, because I went to see her doing art, left see her Walker, still doing art, painting, stuff like that. And then Shadow, of course, he was into art. So Richardo Barrett is my brother. So at the time, Richardo was going to COB. And I always used to be in COB around, different artists. So everyone used to thought I was going there. So I'm familiar with being around. I know y'all doing y'all classwork and stuff. And I just used to be taking in little things like that. But what got me into photography is when I went to Synergy Bahamas and I started learning about computer stuff and started bootlegging all type of softwares and stuff and and keep in mind I didn't know any photographers. I didn't even know the only thing close to photography I knew about was Mr. Photo. Like stuff like that. I didn't know people used to be walking around taking pictures and stuff. So it was that or between YouTube certified. I just used to be watching tutorials. If I wanted to learn how to do this, I'll Google it and be like, okay, then I'll go practice it until I got familiar with doing it. I think when I did get familiar with other photographers is when I started to like create more work, and like putting it on social media, the website and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Other people doing this around there. So,
That's really interesting. This idea of being, well, it's not an idea, it's like a practical thing of being YouTube certified. And I think all of us who went through the traditional education route would say that we still had to go to YouTube to learn certain things, and we learned a lot through observation and through being surrounding ourselves with like-minded people, and even
mhm,
just through conversation with one another, like you were developing technique for something, or we watch like a dog is in the crowd and she's like, wait, so, so like I remember watching how a dog would use spray paint in the building ground with her work when she had a studio space at pop up the same time that I did when I infused that in my practice. But I think what I'm really interested in, and Keith is a painter, Kachelle is a mixed media artist who's practicing grounded in drawing, and then have Delton as a photographer. I wanted to like root or bring to like their respective mediums, just in case, audience didn't know. But I'm thinking, because we speak a lot about mentorship in this exhibition specifically, and I know that it's not as what's the word clear. It's not very clear that you would see and say, well, Jodi's mentors, Keith's mentors, So I'm wondering the difference, if there is any, between having like, that's not how I want to go with that question. The question I want to ask is that how do you guys define mentorship, and how does that definition arrive, given that you are all in have had instances with artist led spaces. So Delton being at having a studio at 9, Kachelle is also at 9, having the history of working at pop up. Keith also the history of pop up and working at ICE now. How do you define mentorship in this like space where we have a lot of artists at studios? We have this like very big, both growing community of people. Who ever wants to take it?
Yeah. It's a little the way that I define mentorship is somebody that is explicitly training you for whatever your goals or your dreams are. I don't think that I've ever had a mentor. I don't think I've ever experienced a real mentorship. I would say that I've learned more from my peers. And I feel like even going through college, um, me and Swaby, we always had
Tell the people who Swaby is, please.
so Jill Swaby, hey Swaby, is also a graduate from COB and is a booming successful artist at the time. So me, her, Kia, I feel like we always had a very kind of like strong critique aesthetic to say, look at this work and tell me your honest thoughts and opinions. And I think because we were working together for so long, we could kind of like have an idea of like what you were trying to do. And we can say, this isn't right, this is wrong, or try reading about this, or I heard about this artist, look at this person to see if it can guide you to what you're trying to do. So I feel like that is, I guess, like the mentorship that I had, and I feel like it's still kind of going on now, where I'm still making work and I'm still showing it to my friends and say, hey, can I get some feedback, or how is this looking? And I feel like I prefer that.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. I don't know if I prefer it because I'm used to it. There are other artists above me that I would have liked to get mentored from, but I feel like there's a there's a there's a distance when it comes to certain artists being too close to another artist and works start to blend.
I understand.
So I feel like there is a real fear of that kind of copycat syndrome and not being able to sort of guide artists to their own path without them being a little bit too tight on you. So I don't know if that's the reason why there's not more of it. But I kind of like what I have going on now.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess I could speak from different levels of this question, solely because, like Kachelle, when I was at Pop Up, I had Navarro Newton and NOA Harris Smith as my partners in the prize, but me and Navarro shared a lot of studio time together. So in a lot of ways, we would challenge each other on ideas and concepts on and the delivery of such, like how do these things make sense. So in the early stages, it was a lot of pair level mentorship, but also working in the administrative side of it. Like I got mentorship from like Antonius Roberts and like just in the administrative side, not as much as in my practice, but like that would be one of the persons that I would think of as a mentor. And like now that I'm in ICE, um, um, practicing at ICE, I kind of feel like a mentor. Because now I'm talking to like artists that are just now trying to learn what their practice is. And what Kachelle was just talking about is something that I am kind of seeing for myself now, that in a space where there's a lot of people that are pretty much on the same level, it's very difficult for the artist to understand the difference between creating their own visual language and using elements that they think are strong from other people's visual language.
Right.
So if an artist is making a body of work, they they know why they're making it. They know what these things represent. They know why this color is this is here, this is here. And if you're a person that is inspired by it and you take elements of it, but you don't try to combine that with your own language, then it will never really come off in the same way. It'll always feel ingenuine. And I feel like for a lot of young artists, um, the mentors are in fact scared to give these nuggets to them because they are in fear that this person might just take my spot. But in a lot of cases, the young people just need guidance, but they also need to want to be guided.
Understood. Yeah,
So,
that's a good point.
So in a lot of ways, like man, I feel like being in pop up was like super important for all the artists that came up in that year span whilst it existed, solely because there was different levels of artists. So you could learn in different capacities and learn why the things that you're learning are important in said capacities, as opposed to just being all of the same cloth and just bouncing random ideas without any true path to take.
Yeah. Delton?
Okay, so Remember we was talking about this earlier, right?
Yeah.
And we was like, Kachelle was like, "Oh, I like getting feedback from my friends." But for me, it was like I was like, it's actually a fine line because your friends can like anything. Anything your friends make, oh, Kachelle, that's solid, you know? That's solid. I just get that a lot. Like, I can make a photo, this look like garbage to me, but it is solid. I was like, very all in serious. But if you have if you have someone who, for example, gone to school for this, they know the basics of art, they know
You
all
could
the primary colors.
hold a
Take a look at this and see,
hi.
you know?
Hold the mic to you. Straight like
Sorry.
yeah.
Take a
Thanks.
look at this and see like something missing, you know? If you do this, this could make it more powerful. So it's almost like I think it's personal at this point. You have to take it, you have to take what actually gonna like add substance for you, you know? So
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of add to what you said. Like, I have friends where I show them my work and they're like, "Oh my god, that's amazing. That's great, girl. Like a cell." And I have other friends who just like, "You know exactly what I trying to ask you." And they don't have to say, "Oh, it looks good." If I bring it to them, like I have certain friends where they know they come in to get a critique. I need a critique. I don't need a praise. So I feel like if you don't have a community of people that's going to critique the work, you shouldn't just show it to like anybody who is just like, of course they're gonna tell you good stuff. That's just like showing work to your mom. She's gonna say, "Oh, that's so great, baby." But if you ask in for like, "Hey, you know my intentions, you know what I'm trying to do, you know my purpose. Is it coming through? Does this make sense? Is this presentable?" And then they could be able to give you better feedback. So I feel like finding those certain peers are important.
what you said, critique, I think critique is what we really looking for, you know? So that's a good.
Yeah, you all bring up very, very interesting points. And I wanted to, with Kachelle, point out that I think it works because you, Gio, and Kia, your output is so different, even though it's like dealing, like materialistically, like you dealing with the same kind of things. Like there's this affinity to patterns, there's this affinity to like the hand being present in the work and like embellishing, but it looks so different. So I think one of the things that um in pop-up specifically, pop-up was a place that had photographers, it had painters, it had people who was doing sculpture, people who's doing jewelry. So it was a mixed disciplinary space, and when you have that, you're able to learn from different forms of output to then say, well, okay, if Nadia is making jewelry like this, then I could pull that into my painting practice, and then whoever is doing sculpture outside could look at my painting practice and take something from that. But if you have a homogenous space like ice where everybody is painting, um, it then becomes kind of like cyclical, and ideas and outputs are recycling because the mediums aren't diverse enough. So it's like, how do you? And I think that that's something about ecosystems. You know, like you have to have like a diverse ecosystem to then have like a certain amount of growth. I hope that I'm making sense. But yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, it's ICE is pretty interdisciplinary too. Like there's like a lot of different styles being done now. Like there's spoken word and ceramics. There's like a lot of different stuff happening now. As far as what I was saying was specific to like visual language in whichever form
Yeah,
that
and
that may be. But I was meaning
but I'm speaking from the place of there there was a time when that space was painfully heavy, and now there's a cross pollination happening,
mm,
and now that now that there's like a synchronicity of visual language, or there's like um a common visual language. I don't think that's uncommon for art spaces either. So you have different collectives and different like movements where you could say that I could pinpoint in art history that these people were working together around the same time because everything visual language is the same. So it just kind of happens
yeah,
in spaces like that. So it's not a critique, but an observation.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I then move on to how these things, and I think we touched on it a bit, about, but how does this like idea of mentorship sharing, I think, is coming up, with Kachelle talking about your relationship with Geo and Kia, and coming through like COB and stuff, this idea of sharing, this idea of community, this idea of how all of that then plays in your practice. Can you speak to how, and all three of you, can you speak to how this cultivation in this space is evident in your work?
I'm sorry. Can you
speak?
redefine that question?
Can you speak to how, for example, I see a common thread within everybody in your year from COB's practice. So I'm asking if you could pinpoint specific ways that, because you've been around these people, these things are apparent in your work. If that's a safe question to ask. It may not be. Not safe like as in, but
to be honest, I don't know why it happened. I can say that even early on in all three of our works, we were always working figuratively. And I feel like, touching back to what you guys said about in painting, like I feel like painting, when they start you off in school, it's kind of like the basics of how you go through art, and then it's also the most accessible in the country when it comes to making art. Everyone's painting in acrylics, and or people are drawing, and then even the drawing starts to come off as like craftly, like caricature type tourist work. So it was just kind of like innate that all of us was working in figures. And I think that during our pop-up, me and Swaby's pop-up residency is when she started getting into fabrics. And I think that had to do with the resident artist that was also at pop-up, John Elliott, who was I guess what do you call it? I don't want to say seamstress, but quilter.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, so I know that she had a big connection with Jan that helped her start doing the portraits and stitching, and that was like the first time that she started doing the stitch work with the portraits. And for me, majority of the works just started coming out. The subject matter just happened to be male, because I was making work about, my friends, my family, and specifically, I'm so close to a lot of the men in my life that was just like the first subject that came out. And with Kia, the work was about her. So I feel like naturally it just sort of blossomed from there. And even like having, our teachers like John, Heino, their works are also pretty figurative heavy, with the use of mixed mediums. So I feel like having teachers that, I would say all of them, use different mediums in their artistic practices, even though they were maybe teaching like a very kind of basic class. So even Sue Bennett Williams, ceramicist, she does watercolors as well and combines the two. So I feel like that was kind of like ingrained in us to always try different mediums and get your point across, and how much mediums you need to put in a piece. And it just stuck from there.
That's fair. Thank you. Keith?
For me, it's always been about like presentation of artwork. I look at the way artists, materials, like the way that they make the work, like give it its best opportunity to look its best, if that makes sense. So
It does.
a lot of artists, I would pretty much just ask for like materials and be like, this paint is better. Stretching canvas myself is better, and like learning the skills from the artist to be able to like achieve these things. As far as my work, it's never really been an artist that I could say I look at that directly informs my work, if that makes sense. I do have like a lot of like international painters that I look at to like try to understand the way things are painted, and then like the way to apply. But like as far as trying to build the conversations, it's always been just more of survey. I think you put it like that before, and that's like a beautiful way to say it. Like I just from conversations with people and trying to understand what it is that I'm trying to say from multiple perspectives. Um, that's where I get a lot of my like inspiration for work. So a lot of the time, pretty much my society informs the practice.
Delton,
Pretty
is there
fresh.
any bit of
Yeah.
Richardo's aesthetics or any other artists that you were looking at while you were around COB, any photographers coming up? And I know you said that that's like a new kind of exploration for you, but is there anything that you could pinpoint that those people did that you then now like can see in your practice?
It was one thing, Photoshop.
Okay.
Shadow did a lot of animation, like figure drawing and stuff. And he always had Photoshop open on his laptop. I didn't know about it, but I always used to see him doing it until, I bootlegged it and started uploading pictures into it and editing it and all of that. The thing about that process was I wasn't taking pictures of myself at the time. It was just landscape, macro, still life, stuff like that. And what I wanted to do was put myself in those places that I was taking photographs of. And that's what it kind of evolved into. So, yeah, I think what actually helped me more with like inspiration was like signing up with like online art spaces, uploading photos and getting feedback from those people. So
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Want to say something? Oh. No, that's really interesting that you three came at it from three different perspectives. I know from my practice, I could pinpoint and say that Kendra Thorpe is my mentor, and that's solely because she was like, "Come to UT, study with me," and I was like, "Okay." And even then, the only thing that I could say that the thorough line between our practice is the exploration of medium. Like she's like, come be doing a bronze pour, and I'm like, all right, I don't know nothing about bronze, but I'll go and learn that skill and then try to implement that in my work. um I also think that I have a community of mentors, and I say that because I want to honor what people like pour into me, even though it's in like small nuggets. I feel like mentorship doesn't need to have like a longevity for it to be impactful, so people like Heino, I see Heino maybe like once a month now because he worked with Turn, but every time he sees me, he says something like very impactful. I'm like, whoa, that changed my life. So I think that based off of what the three of you said, like this community is such a generous community, sharing community, and we're able to pour into one another to build up the community. And for this exhibition specifically, I know that we put you guys in conversation with Lavar at an attempt to kind of bridge the gap, because I think one of the things that happens as well, and you guys talked about it, distance, like this idea that we're not able to like walk up to older artists that we admire and be like, hey, I see you draw that little rat in the corner. How did you do that? You know what I mean? So can you share with us how, because I know you guys did maybe like one or two studio visits with him, how that went? If there was anything that he said that was like illuminated in a way, if there are any artists, Bahamian artists, because I can't say that I could go talk to the Americans and be like, come talk to this person. But are there any Bahamian artists who live abroad that you would like to work with or talk to? Yeah, that's my question. That's okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
we back. But yeah, just having the experience to be able to talk with him is great. There are a lot of international Bohemian artists that I feel like we could bridge the gap for, but like I feel like social media is doing its thing, and I also shout out to a lot of like the geos and like people like Jeffrey that like still talk to you. Like if you hit them up on Instagram, they won't blue tick you or like seeing you, they'll give you some insight. Like I feel like social media has made that bridge a lot smaller.
Definitely. Yeah.
So shouts out to those artists and like the artists that are not using the social media, reach out.
Um, for me, I was always a fan of Lavar since I saw his work in Central Bank in 2008. So
There you go.
for so for me to have this experience, I'm just like, I talking to Lavar, and Lavar was like, it ain't not serious. Like he really just was like, girl, come down. But I feel like he was able to really, even though I didn't have no work started, but I was able to kind of show him like my past works, what I was trying to do, and I feel like he was able to really look at what you were doing and give you like the exact thing to either change or alter to fit the context of the work. Like he told you to go smaller, he told me to go bigger. He was like, this work too small. Um, and I wasn't able to do everything big, but I already had that mind to do that, and I like the fact that he was able, even though he said, good job, you're doing good. It feels good to be reassured that the doubt that you already had, somebody
Yeah.
said, hey, affirmed it. Yeah, so that was a good feeling to know that, hey, what you're doing is actually correct and it's going good and it's going clear. So I was able to get a lot of feedback from him. I didn't know that he was a fan of my work. He was like, he actually bought one of my works last year,
Yes.
so that was great.
Yes, he did.
So it's really good to feel acknowledged by somebody who you've been watching for so long. Yeah, so for me, like that was my highlight. I even forget the second part of the question.
That's okay. I forget it too, but that's all right.
No, but I want to answer it.
We come back to it when I come
We
back.
come back.
I actually remember. So I ain't gonna lie, Laval was a lot of help. Like the information he gave me, I was like, why wasn't getting this all this time? Like things he like critiquing. I had all my work done from that time. So showed him the photos I had, and he's like, Delton, you know what you need? I was like, silence. I was like, what? And he's like, you need like some disruption, like he's like, if I walk in a gallery, he know what he's gonna expect from me. And I was like, that's true, because all my pictures look the same. So he is like, try to like, catch people off guard, like start adding stuff, if you want to build it up some more. Then he gave me like illustrations, like if you see the man cross the road using a hammer and you need the hammer, borrow the hammer, like you could borrow from different artists, it ain't a crime. And I was like, that's true, because as artists we like to think that because we using someone's style, we teaching from them. But the actual reality of it is that we're actually trying to use a tool to tell a story. So I think that was like one of the key points I got from him. So yeah, that's basically it.
The artist, the international artist. That was the question.
What about it? Oh, I forgot his name. Not Tabar. Is Tavares?
Is it?
Stir up?
Is it?
Stir up? No. He's with Mastery Projects.
Tavares?
Tavares.
Yes.
Tavares.
Tavares Strawn for
Yeah.
those. The Mastery Projects is a gallery in Albany. You
What
done?
was the question?
The question was if there was a international Bahamian artist that you would want to be connected with, who would that person be?
Yeah.
That you don't have connection with. It is Tavares Strawn. Okay. You as well? Okay, awesome. Tavares, if you're watching. Yeah, that's really neat. I think yeah, I I saw LeVar Chunkanu once. I was rushing. It was like a Tuesday practice. And I was rushing and I just like looked to like my right and I was like, hey, and he's like, hey, you still making work? And I was like, yeah, so he's always been quite generous with his time, with his sharing. And he's a very accessible person and you really don't realize that. I think we have this like we think about people in this like grandiose way because they are away and doing like big things because they are a big deal. And yes, I'm very, very glad that he was able. And thank you, Amanda, because I think that you're watching, for being really integral in making those connections. Amanda is one of our directors. So I think I want to just, oh, my person would be Janine Anthony. I follow her on, she's a Bahamian artist who's a performance artist. She actually lives in Texas, I believe. And I'm like, lady, I will find you and we will work together at some point. But just to kind of like round it out in a way, because I do want to open up the floor for questions if anybody has any. Actually, I have a kind of cheeky question. Because I know all of you have been practicing for like 10 plus years. So this is not like you're not fresh out the gate. You're not fresh out. So how do you engage with the terminology emerging artists? I said it was cheeky.
It's, I don't know, because it's like when you start off, you're amateur and you feel good because like, ooh, I'm an amateur artist. And then when you're emerging, it's like, okay, I'm getting there. I feel it starts to get a little sour when the name just sticks a little bit too long.
I understand.
So
I
it's not that
understand.
it's not that I have a problem with the word, but I'm just like, when am I
Emerged.
merged? When have I arrived?
Yes.
Like I feel like when do I graduate from that title?
Yeah.
And you can't personally set that.
Graduate yourself.
Yeah, I feel like the community and your accomplishments and does that for you, but it's just like, when does that happen? I think that's the challenging part, and because you can't challenge it, you're just like, okay, I just guess I'm still an emerging artist. And then you see other artists who, are international, who you might feel are more successful than you, and they still emerging artists, and I'm like, oof.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
mm,
I think she hit the nail on the head. I think that's like perfect. I constantly think about that, like all the time. No, all the time. No, all the time. Like I feel like, especially it also feels crazier when you're constantly like doing stuff. So if you're an artist that has a show, or you're participating in a show maybe once every year and a half, you could be like, okay, in the last 6 years I've been in 4 shows. I feel like I'm still emerging. But if you're an artist that's been in 4 shows in the last 5 years, you like, I'm I'm pretty sure people know who I am now, right? Like you start to feel like which um side are you on? But then, like she says, you look at other artists that have been doing way more than you, and you're like, okay, I guess I could wait a little bit long. But even in that, like, what does that label really mean? Like, what does it matter? Like, if you're making work, then that's the important thing. Like, if you've been emerging for 10 years, the only person that has to believe that you're like still emerging is you. Like, if the crowd feels as though like this guy has maybe another 25 years to go and then we'll like take this dude serious. But ultimately it's about like how serious you take yourself. If you feel like you're putting that time in your practice and you feel like what I would have done in this 1 year has translated to 5 years of me working, then you are doing the thing. So
I honestly never thought about it. Like emerging artists, like it doesn't bother me. I what I would consider like what I value more than emerging artists is experience. So me knowing how long I've been doing it and what I expect from myself in the future, I think that takes the title like out the picture, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's really good. I think he was gonna say something.
No.
Oh, so she just has grabbed the mic so confidently. Yeah, I think there's multiple things happening here. So I think, and this is just I'm very briefly taking my turn hat and putting it to the side and picking up my artist hat and putting it on. I think one of the things, well, and then I put the turn hat back on top of that. So I'm wearing both hats right now. Um, in the context of, I think one of the things that's happening here is that in like within our community, we could have said, "Oh, I make it into any, I dare." You know, like being like exhibiting at the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas was like a marker of like success. You made it. Like my work is curatorially like contextualized. It's published in a catalog. But then as the prominence of that changed, and it was a little bit more flexible in regards to who was able to do that, that then changed, and not in a bad way. Ramel is giving me all the side eyes. Ramel is giving me all the side eyes. No, because we're so context, the art community that I grew up in was, you had the emerging artist night, and you had emerging artist exhibitions, amateur artist exhibitions, and that's people who were in my cohort at the College of the Bahamas. They exhibited there. Then they exhibited at Pop Up in a group show, and then maybe like a year or two later, they were invited to participate in any, or if it was an open call, they were able to what's the word, participate, and that then set them apart because their work was accepted, my work was not. You know, it felt like more of a delineation of prominence, for the lack of a better word. But I think given the change of the nature of the institution, the change in the gallery spaces and what they are doing, that's then causing us to have to redefine what emerging looks like here. Also, because there is more of an international context being placed on what we're doing here as well. So I think in the context of the international arena, what happens in the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas doesn't quite translate when you come outside of this context. So then it's like an added thing of, how do we then exhibit across the pond to then be like, I am now established, or like there's a diversity in the experience that I have that then supports me transitioning out of this space. So maybe I asked that question so I could answer it for myself, but yeah, basically. But now I would like to take the opportunity to open it up to the floor. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi. So I've been a big fan of all of you guys for like years, and also Lavar. And I said this when I came in, and you guys like killed it. This is a stunning show. So hand clap, congrats to all of you guys. There's one thread that I noticed throughout everybody's work here, and it's like the care and the elevation for the underdog, especially the male underdog, and these Black Bahamian identities, like in all different ways. So I was wondering if there was any conversation between you guys and Laval on that topic, or if that was just something that, or with the gallery. I mean, it's great curation, like off the top. But I was just wondering if that was ever like a conversation that you guys had, because a lot of the conversations that you said you seem to highlight were about the production of the work. And I was wondering if there's any conversation about the themes behind the work. And then also, I guess, like a second reason I thought about that is because Lavar's work is so much about his upbringing here in the Bahamas and celebrating yourself. Like here, most people are like a black, dark skin. Like it's not, you're not the minority. And for him to do all this celebration himself in the US now, like I wonder how that might be. That might not even be a question for you. But I was just wondering if there was any discussions about that when producing these works.
So like a good amount of time before the show happened, I went to Kachelle in a panic because I was like, what am I doing? Like for me, this specific body of work is such a change in like conversation from what I've been making. A lot of my work has been very confrontational, very much so, um, social problems. And like this was a big turn for me, as in like making work about my family. There's something a lot more delicate and intimate about it. So in the beginning, like we had the conversation and it was just like we are looking at this Lavar painting. You've seen it 1,000 times. What are we feeling? What are we talking about? And for me and her, we kind of like felt like nostalgia and like memories, black experience, the same things that you're saying. Because even if I feel like even if we didn't have the conversation, just because of the way our practice is already set up, like us being in a room together, no matter what we would have created, there would have been a synergy with the work. Solely because all of the artists here think about their experience and how they can translate their experience through different mediums to the public. So we, conversations happen, but a lot of things are like in these conversations, even like back then, like a lot of things are very small that become like snowballed into something very big. So once again, good job with the curation. Good job with the curation. You guys did great. But that conversation was super important.
Um, I never saw no one work until the show. So I trusted that we were put together for a reason. So we didn't really need to do any kind of additional work to make all of our ideas fit together. I think they did a fantastic job putting the pieces where they needed to be, even the conversations that are happening with the individual works in comparison to all of ours are just perfect. So I feel like you guys really, really did the work. Yeah, most of the inspiration came from Lavar's work and the title. I tried to kind of look at it as exactly what the title said, like to all who come to this happy place, welcome. And because the work, when you look, I had my husband's mom. She's very religious, and she viewed the work, and I was like, hold on now. I was like, I know you're seeing some goat heads and some stuff, and you have some ideas, but please look at the work objectively. So you would look at the work and see negativeness. So I really tried to make sure that the experiences that I had, also growing up in the quote unquote ghetto, um, for lack of a better word, I tried to find the positiveness of it because it was still a reality, and I don't think a lot of people choose, the situations that they're in, and a lot of times they find greatness in things that we see as negative. So I really made sure that the work still portrayed them in a good light. Mhm.
Okay, so answer Sydney question. We didn't have conversations, like none at all. I think it was a show at ICE that I did see Wanna Keep Work, and I was like, "Yo, this solid." And what did happen was he had a bigger piece there, and someone told me like he had to take it and put it in the back because everyone was looking at it, and I was kind of mad because I wanted to see it. So, but anyway, from from the title, I kind of borrowed a lot of inspiration, especially like I think I worked with Laval one time. Like he wanted me to photograph some stuff in his backyard, like staging his cousins doing like things like this. And I kind of got an idea like where his inspiration come from how we like articulate all these things. So I was like, you know what? If I could put myself in spaces like I feel comfortable in, like I like to be in the bush, I like to be at the sea, and almost like present myself as saying, welcome, this is the spot, and that was basically where I got all my ideas from.
Um, One thing that I think that you said just now that's like super important is how he had you staging things like references is a super important aspect of our work as well. And I think that's another thing that connects us in a lot of ways. Each one of us stage situations or use our references to tell the stories in the work. So for Delton, it's like crazy because his work is a reference, as opposed to like uh, a version of a reference. So I think that I just thought that was a cool thing
Yeah, it's
to
this
add.
this show is very environmental. Like it is extremely that balance of the indoor, the outdoor, the intrapersonal, familial, and the external. Um, that was a really good question. Thank you. Is there any other questions from the audience? Somebody over here had their hand up. Somebody else?
Hi, my name is Dawn. My question is for Delton. I'm a huge fan of Delton. So I just moved here from Turks. I've been following Delton for years,
Nice.
and I'm a big part of the artist, so I would say creative community in Turks, and there are other huge fans of Delton in Turks. I don't know if you even know that. So I just
I
want to
don't
say
know.
big up to you. Like you're a famous Bahamian international artist, straight up.
Awesome.
But I think my question is in the same vein of I guess almost the imposter syndrome that some of us could have about the titles that we apply to our identity as creatives. Um, you're a photographer. My medium is photography as well, and I think in that medium, there's a longer path to calling yourself an artist or being called an artist. Um, Karl Lagerfeld as a very interesting. They actually had to wait until Lagerfeld died to do an exhibition for him at the Metropolitan Museum of Art because he just wouldn't let them do it. He said he didn't want to see all of those old dresses. He just wanted to keep on working. But if you make clothes, you can go from a seamstress to a designer to a couturier, and there's a process to get up that stage. And Lagerfeld said, I'm still just a dressmaker. So as photographers, to go from being a photographer to a fine art photographer to an artist is a process that no one else can really tell you when to put that hat on. Um, I just moved there 3 months ago. When I went to Bahama and I saw your work, I was just so overwhelmed with, joy for you to see that validation. But my question is, do you need that? Is that valuable to you? Especially, and I want to compliment you on this, you produce a lot of work. A lot. It's something that I admire because it's difficult to constantly put out. So where do you draw the value from whatever it is you're producing, and how do you identify your creative persona?
That's a lot. Okay. I always get that a lot. Like people come to me and be like, Delton, I don't see you as a photographer. Like you as an artist to me. But it's yeah. In different situations, I'm a photographer. In other situations when I'm trying to like create, express ideas, I'm an artist. And I think that's in my career, that's one of the things like I have to know when to put it aside and when to like use it, if that makes sense. And creating a lot of body, I think my problem with creating is like I like to create a lot. Like I have a tendency to like I have to stop myself from posting work on social media because I feel like I kind of like might overwhelm people, but I have hard drives on hard drives of work. I don't know what to do with them at this point. So, but that's a good thing. I know that's a good thing. I think when it comes to like creating like a specific body of work, that's what really like, I don't know how to say it, like it helps me to like focus more on where I want it to go, you know? If that makes sense. Your last questions with persona, I didn't understand that.
No, you answered it, which is, do you call yourself an artist or a fine art photographer or a photographer, or, you know?
Like Jodi said, and in reference to wearing hats, I think it's like you gotta know when to wear it and when to put this aside. So that's what it is for me. Like, yeah.
Also, too, like I feel like he said it too, like it's location sometimes too. In the beginning of my practice, I used to have like a hard time because in a lot of ways I thought like my work, if you looked at it on the side of a street, would it be graffiti? And if I took the same work and put it in a gallery space, would it be considered art? So in a lot of ways, I feel like that's how it is with photographers. Like it's the space, like whatever space that you go into, you kind of just transform into that thing. So if you're outdoors, you feel like you're a photographer, people will label you as a photographer because they see you in like process. But then when they see it on the wall, you are an artist because they see it as a finished product. So all of that stuff is just in your brain. Don't like
But
think too much on it.
I also think I was talking to Delton on our last artist meeting that like the art historical context of photography here, in order for us to like engage with his practice and other photographers practice in a more like expansive and diverse way, is not present. So we often engage with photography like it is painting, but it's not. It's like a whole other discipline that has a whole other history unto itself, and it should be like talked about, written about, and respected in that vein. So that's the work. I think one of the things that Delton and other photographers like him, like Melissa Alcina, Tamika Galanis, and other photographers in the Bahamas right now are pushing the arts administrative community to do is like do your homework, do your research, like learn about the context of which these things like exist in and their history, so that we could then translate to the public why this thing has value without attaching it to that very slippery slope of like painting is on like superior, you know. And I think that in the like Delton's work as photography in the context of Keats' work, which is you know, paintings of photographs, in the context of Lavar's work, you know, which started off as a photo reference. I think that in like proximity then like stamps this photograph as a photograph, and it don't have to be nothing else but a photograph. And I think that was so great for you to give us that in this space. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
Hello. So my question is, first of all, I enjoy all of your works. I teach all about you in my classroom through the year. So I think that counts you as an artist if you're being taught in the classroom, if that counts as anything. But my question is like, what motivates you to create art? Because all of you have like inspiration, but what motivates you to put that into action? So for me, like right now, I have inspiration, but I have like an emotional / creative block that's kind of preventing me from putting it into action. So for each of you, how do you get over that to, you know, act? And a part two to that question, if you weren't a part of the community that you're in, because all of you are familiar with each other, I don't know how close you are in general, but if you weren't a part of this community, would you still be creating art as frequently and with the amount of intensity that you do?
Those are great. So for the first question, I feel like a lot of artists have blocks, or just times when it's hard to be creative. whether something may be going on in your personal life. Like I go on spurts where I could make 20 paintings in a year and then don't touch a pencil for 2 years. So like things like that happen, and I feel like that's in every discipline. Like music artists take like 5 years to drop one album, and you're like, it's 16 songs, bro. You could have given me that last year. But in a lot of ways, whenever you create, it's a moment of you trusting yourself to do something that makes sense. So Jodi said this to me like a while back, and this is one of the best things she's ever said. Like, making work doesn't mean like everything is supposed to be shown. Like, a lot of times you could literally make work in your studio only for your eyes, just to get through something that you may be going through, and then that sparks your creative process again into making more works in the future. But you have to trust yourself and give yourself the space to not be an artist for a while, so that you remember why you do it. For a person like me, like if I didn't make a cent, I'd be painting, because it's like the only thing that I actually like. So it is what it is. But like in certain situations, I feel like in being in this community and like being in all of these different spaces, I have a different appreciation for the art that I see. Because when I didn't have like a chance to be in the community and I looked at like abstract work, I didn't understand it. I didn't like care much for it. And then going into a space and then learning the history of like a Kendall Hanna and understanding why like this work is like so important, and like how this will inform even my figurative works that have absolutely nothing to do with abstraction. Like those things are important. So if I was out of the community, I'd probably still be making work, but I don't feel like the weight or gravity of what it is that I'd be making would be the same. It might be something that might be just like, get me 50,000 likes on TikTok. Like that would be, so being in the community or finding your way into the community is important, because you get to respect art as itself before you create art. So yeah.
For me, the inspiration comes from just living life. Like, I've been inspired through conversations. I've been inspired through driving, and I notice somebody in the street and I'm like, I need to hurry up, write what I just saw so I could remember it, because I now have an idea to do something. Like, I've taken pictures of people randomly and I'm just like, oh, this inspired me. I feel like that art brain for me just never turns off. And it's just innate that the work just needs to be made, or like I have the idea and I need to get it out. And I think that it also feeds into like the lack as well. Like, when you want to see more of what you're doing and you don't really see it around, you want to kind of create that thing. Like, if you're not seeing images of yourself, if you're not being inspired by the things around you, it makes you create those things that you see lacking around. So for me, it's like I can't not make work. It's just not something that I can explain. It's just like it was just innate, and I feel like that also kind of works with the community as well. Like, I don't see myself outside of the community. I feel like everything outside of the community is boring, and I feel, and I know that it's different, because even people, as I said, people from the outside would look in and be like, wow, y'all are weird. Or people do that thing where they're like, you as an artist, I could tell. Like that, like but there's an innate energy that we all have. And you have people who are in different practices. You have people who are not even artists, but they feel drawn to artists. And I feel like there are certain people that always have that kind of like creative mode in them, and it doesn't have to be a painting, it doesn't have to be a sculpture. There's so many ways to create without it having to be something that's sold, something that has to be shown in the gallery. I think you need to look at it as not having the idea like stuck in your head and not being too focused on making bad art, because I feel a lot of times people don't want to make the art because they're like, oh, I don't have the skills at the moment. I don't have the materials. I don't have this. The inspiration isn't there. It's like, if you're thinking about something, you could do it. Like, it doesn't have to be the idea you want to do, but I feel like even having the practice of making is still a job in itself, because not every time, the same way how you have your body and you have to work your body for it to stay healthy, it's like art is the same way. It's like, okay, you have this creative block, you still have to work to kind of get it out. The same way how you break your leg and you have to heal, you have to rehab it. It's the same action. I see it as work. I don't ever see myself as like, this is my off day as an artist. It's like it's always on for me. So I would say, try to find more inspiration out of just life in general. I think having an idea of what inspires you, I feel like having conversations with people would sort of bring out your own explanation. Sometimes you don't know what you like until you talk to somebody else and they're like, you really like this thing. You're like, do I? Yeah, you talk about it so much, but you don't realize it. So I feel like even those simple moments of learning yourself through other people would help.
Okay, so you're a teacher, right? I think the best thing for you to like keep yourself like motivated to paint is like give yourself assignments. Like when I first started photography, I used to be on YouTube and I used to see tutorials and be like, okay, I need to try this. And I'll set a date time and say, okay, I could try it this time, that time. And by the time I finish doing that idea, it's like a momentum happen. Like I want to do more and more and more and more. But the thing about that, at least for me right now, I trying to stop. Cause no, because so many ideas, and it's like, which one is worth it, you know? Like, it's like you don't want to do nothing like it doesn't have no weight, no value, no purpose. You want to do something that's like actually gonna like change the world. So yeah, that's all I could say on that.
Hi. So it was mentioned before that obviously there's a community and it's very open, it's very warm and welcoming. And then there are people, especially a lot of Bahamians. I know for me personally, recently now, not being an artist or creative myself, but being very drawn to the community that you have. How can we who are like kind of outside that community, but who are drawn and attracted to the art that you do, how can we best support you, or how do you best feel supported by that outer community?
Showing up. Yeah, just come, use social media. Exactly. They got drinks, everything. They make yeah, but use social media to your advantage. A lot of these galleries are we are a community. So if you go to one gallery and you're like, hey, what are the other galleries in the community that I could look at? There are it is very easy to find all of these spaces, and all of these spaces give you dates, times, if things can change, if it can rain, you know what I mean? So you have like knowledge is your best thing. Trying to know as much going on gives you the opportunity to see as much artists as possible, gives you the opportunity to figure out what artwork you like, what conversations you want to have with artists, and then how do these conversations make you feel in your everyday life? Like, does it inspire you to do anything in your whatever capacity? So I feel like for those that are outside of the community, all we want is your presence. Like a lot of time people feel like it's like an elitist thing where you have to be of a certain standard to be in an art gallery. Like you are as you are, like come as you are. And yeah, very religious person too. But yeah, it's always best to just try to get the information and then just be present. You don't have to spend your money. The artists really want to, like, unless you want to, because we want you to, as the artist, we want you to, but we also just want to interact with you and understand what you feel about what it is that we're doing as well.
Yeah, I second that. Just come out. I don't think that you have to understand everything to enjoy it. Even us artists don't like every art piece we see. Um, but I feel like that's still a conversation in itself. Why don't you like the work, and can you articulate that? And that also get kind of like, you get to know yourself by figuring out why you don't like something. So I feel like, people always open to talk and have conversations. Openings, the artists are usually there, always open to have a conversation about the work, and you can by looking at the work and be like, oh, the work is about this. Yeah, I figured that. I knew that. So, don't sell yourself short. I don't think that just because you're not in the art scene that you don't already have some of the knowledge that we're also putting in the work itself. Like, all of us are Bahamian, grew up here, and the work is literally about us. So there's obviously something about the work that you can get.
But just in the spirit of what just happened, I believe that the live stream may have ended. So I just wanted to, if it has not ended, formally say thank you all for coming. Very, very appreciative of your time. It's still live? Oh, look at that. So I will stop and then say this again after Delton finished, talking.
I forgot your question. Yeah, by just coming out. Like, I think I had this discussion. Me, you, and Shadow had this discussion before. Like, it's almost like colonial, where people feel like it's only for a certain set of people, so they don't want to show up because they don't feel like they're that type of person. But it ain't like that. Like, you could be a Jones on the road. If you want to see the art, you could come out. So that's the best way to support, by just showing up. Like, you don't even have to look at that, just be there. You know.
Yeah, I would also just add, as someone on the arts admin side, is that Malusa does anything for free. And I think a lot of, say this in the context of the live stream, but I think some people have this idea that, you have to pay to come to these spaces. Most often, I think the only gallery that charges admission to foreigners is the National Art Gallery of Bahamas. Like, Bahamians getting free. So I think as long as you seek information, you will find information, and you, like Alden said, always need to show up. Are there any more questions before we turn it in? Okay. Thank you, Keith, Kachelle, and Delton, for being really appreciated your, this exhibition will be on through until September 2nd. You can visit it Tuesdays through Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Mondays by appointment only. If you'd like to set an appointment, send us an email at info@turngallery.com. Thank you to our lovely audience who came out on a Friday night. Appreciate you. And I will say now, good night. Thank you.